Welcome to our April Jewish poetry series. I'm very excited, as always, to hear all the amazing poets that we have going on. First, thank you always to Philip and Baruch for putting these poets, bringing them here, bringing them together, bringing them to this series. I can't imagine it's easy finding such talent every week or every month. I am Erica. I work for the JCC of Greater Buffalo, so I'm just kind of the host. We just ask that everyone kind of just stay muted during the readings, just so that we don't have any unwanted interruptions or background noise or anything like that. But please, please, please feel free to put anything in the chat. If you have comments or questions, you can put them in the chat and we can everybody can kind of read it as our poets are talking. So without further ado, Philip and Baruch, I'll pass it off to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica.
Thank you, Erica. We want to thank Erica many times for being our Buffalo Point contact. This is sponsored by the Buffalo JCC. And Erica may be the only one in Buffalo at the moment. So she's
Maybe.
she gives it legitimacy. So we've reached that and does a lot of work. And I know how busy she is because the Buffalo JCC has got a lot going on these days, especially this month, right?
Yep.
April is Jewish Poetry Month. Not just
Yep.
poetry, but all kinds of things. So thank you very much. Baruch, how you doing?
Great. I'm happy to see so many people in the audience, and I'm really excited about our jumbo lineup of poets. Usually we have three, but we got excited and we wanted to have four instead because the more the merrier, as they say. Also, I think it's appropriate because today is Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, and who better to express the spirit of the Holocaust than poets? Not that there is any pressure on our poets to do that, but it's just something that uh, um, you know, to keep in mind, I think, because poets are able to express the differences, the divide, they're able to cross the divide that prevents terrible things like that happening. And it can be, as a Jew myself, it can be easy to take for granted knowledge of the Holocaust because learning about the Holocaust was so much part of growing up and is so much part of, I feel like, my culture. But then I recently read a terrible fact, and that is that according to a recent survey, nearly half of Americans are unable to name a single concentration camp or ghetto established by the Nazis in World War II, which is kind of scary and shows that the need for Holocaust education goes on, even if we don't think it, even if we doubt that, because there clearly is a lacking of information. Anyway, regardless of whether our poets read Holocaust poetry or not, I'm sure we're going to have a meaningful experience tonight, and I can't wait to hear their poetry.
Me too. So why don't we thank you, Baruch, for that. And I'm really pleased and delighted to introduce our first poet. We're going alphabetically. And I heard recently Jeff Friedman changed his name from Jeff Zucker. So he would have gone last had he not changed his name. But Friedman, whose 11th book, called Broken Signals, was published recently by Bamboo Dart Press last August, is the author of 10 previous collections of poetry and prose. I'll just mention a few: Ashes in Paradise, The Marksman, Floating Tales, Pretenders, his poems and mini stories. I like that better than prose poems, mini stories. That's another, is it mini story? Is it prose poems? Is it, what do we call these things, Um, and I love that form. And his translations have appeared in tons of journals, including just a few: American Poetry Review, Poetry, New England Review, Poetry International, etc. He's been in also anthologies of best microfiction and anthologies galore. He's also been translated as well, and received numerous awards and prizes, including the National Endowment Literature Translation Fellowship in 2016. And he's been teaching and creative writing at Keene State College, awarded Excellence in Teaching Award and Teaching Performance Award, which is great. Great poet, great teacher. I'm sure he's sent a lot of future poets into the world, and current poets. He's also a board member of the Flash Fiction Institute, and recently collaborated on an improvisational book of response poems with a jazz composer and poet, Roy Nathanson, called A Brief History of Our Ears, which will come out in April of 2020. Is it out yet? This is April of 2025. You can unmute there, Jeff.
It came out. I don't have. Oh yeah, I do have a copy.
Do we get recordings on this associated with this book?
Like the bigger book, we're doing a whole book. I've just fumbled everything, but yeah, like eventually, this is the chapbook that was done. That actually, I mean, if you're all interested, there's a press called Ethelzine that Sarah Lefsick does, and she hand stitches the.
Wow, very cool.
She does beautiful books. So if you want to submit to her, she also has a magazine. And anyway, she's really good. She's a good artist herself and a good writer.
Do you perform these poems with the jazz?
I used to perform with his group actually, but I don't do anything but actually read the poems, and his group cues me. But I used to go down there once a month, and or number of years ago. But in this case, we just wrote the book together, and
okay, all right. Wow.
Do a response book. He's going to there's a song, there's a piece at the end that's going to be like a performance piece at the very end of it that we'll do together.
Okay, you're gonna do it tonight? No,
I'm not, because he's not here.
Yes.
But
okay, all right.
Pretend to scat the saxophone. That would be.
Love it. Okay. Many acknowledge that it's difficult to write humorous poetry, not just a joke poem that relies on the punchline, but a poem that's smart and imaginative, in a sense, to be both funny and serious. Seriously Funny, which, as I recall, is the name of a poetry anthology. Do you have that? Seriously Funny? It's a great poetry anthology. But we're talking laughing out loud funny, or Kafka funny, sometimes a sad funny, like the poem about Jeff's poem about how his sister steals his memories. Jeff's prodigious subject matters, from pickleball to dressing up as a bear to impress a date who prefers bears to another date, mistaking him, this time not for a bear, but for Paul Newman, and he tries to dissuade her. Newman, the speaker, opines, quote, has a I assume maybe Jeff is a speaker, who knows, has a square jaw and I have a weak chin, partially hidden by a scraggly beard. I've never made love to Liz Taylor or Joanne Woodward, and I don't drink 2 6-packs in 2 months, let alone 2 hours. Well, the date said, your tomato sauce is pretty good. That's pretty funny. And that's kind of a sample of Jeff's, at least microfictions and poetry in general. So let's agree with Gerald Stern, who declaimed about Jeff's work, quote, Jeff Friedman is a great liar and an even greater comedian. As a liar, he remembers everything and nothing from the last 2,000 years. As a comedian, he knows hyperbole, pacing, irony, and all the others. He can't fool me, though. He's a true poet, and those are facades. So let's bring on the true poet and his facades to our reading series, Jeff Friedman.
Thank you very much. That was a lovely introduction, and thank you for inviting me, and Brooke for inviting me too, and Erica, thank you for helping to put this on. You, by the way, stole the last poem I was going to read, Newman's Own, but I'll read it anyway because I like. But by reading, but you did it before I did it. But anyway, okay. So for the last 25 or 30 years, I've been working back and forth between the prose poem and the microstory, and somewhere in between. So, and I'm going to start with a piece called My Mother's Dress Shop, which disappeared on me apparently. Oh, here it is. Which was published originally as a prose poem and then appeared in Best Microfiction that year, 2023. I grew up in St. Louis. I was saying before the reading, grew up in St. Louis. My mother had a little dress shop, and as a teenager, I would go down and help unload boxes and break the cardboard boxes down and put them in the dumpster. So it's a little bit about that. Okay. My mother's dress shop. Break down the boxes that held the clothing and stuff them into the dumpster in the alley behind the shop. Break down the racks that held the sexy dresses, the leather coats, the French lingerie, until they are just rods and wheels lying in a corner. Fold up the clothing neatly. Break down the counter, the shelves, and the cash register empty of cash. Break down the shadows that no longer hold voices. Break down the light that drops through the window like a message until it is just a scrap of light. Break down the dust that clings to the walls and counters your mother attacks with a cloth and Windex. Break down the mannequins until they are disconnected limbs, head, and torso. Now there is only the memory of a memory, the striped cat leaping on the counter, its tail ticking back and forth. The nurses in white uniforms peeking in the windows of air to spot a skirt or blouse on sale. Your mother's voice coming back to you, like the smells of a fresh cinnamon sweet roll and steaming black coffee, and the blaze of sun that makes it impossible to see. I'm starting out a little bit here with family. I'm not sure why, but that's the order these came into. So this next one is called Father and Son Singing. And my father always used to say to me that I didn't sing very much. I don't know why he said that, because I wouldn't be singing around the house, but he was always singing around the house, and he didn't actually know the words to most songs, or he'd forgotten them, and he would just make up these syllables all the time, be singing. So anyway, he was a salesman. So my father and son singing. You don't sing much, do you, son? My father asks, sitting in his chair in the living room. He sings broken phrases, disconnected words, syllables that could be mantras the way he bends and stretches them. He sings melodies full of coins and fountains of cash. He sings a son who embraces his absence with real love. Now, sitting in my chair, I sing too. Bridges falling into holes, ties dangling from branches, monogrammed handkerchiefs sailing like kites. I sing the belly of my father, hands that rip cardboard boxes in two, his stubbled cheeks and chin, pillowcases stuffed with bills. I sing glossy wingtips sparking on the pavement, suits made of dust, the melody in the covered mirrors. His song ends with a sigh, mine with a gurgle. Neither of us can carry a tune. The next one is sort of about the idea of homelands and nations, and my father's side of the family came from Hungary and Romania and Transylvania, that area. And my sister went to visit it, and she came back to say that everybody looked like us. Everybody looked like my father. So I thought I'd write something about that. So, homeland. You should visit Hungary, my sister said. It's our homeland. How can it be my homeland? I asked. I've never been there. Everyone there has dad's brown eyes and his rock of a chin. Everyone looks like him and like us, she said. I peered into my sister's face and saw my father's face, and then my own. I remembered how my father combed wildroot into his black, curly hair, huffing so forcefully he fogged up the bathroom mirror, how he whipped the comb away, flinging oily drops on the tile floor, how at dinner he inhaled the hot breath of Hungarian stew, as though it were the air rising from the earth of his homeland. A country of our people, I thought. Everyone looking like everyone else. Everyone looking like us. Every face a mirror of every face. Scary, I said. I'm not going. It's bear season at this point, and we have a lot of bears in the neighborhood around here. So I thought since Philip was so kind to bring up the poem, I thought I would read my bear love poem called Bear Fight. And I just want to mention that I'm not sure if wolves huff or not, but bears definitely huff, and they huff really loudly. So, okay, bear fight. When Liza fell in with a bear, I was more than disappointed, as I had been in love with her since childhood. What's he got that I don't? I asked as we walked past the diner together. He's a bear, she said. She let go of my hand. He gets a little jealous when I'm out with my friends. Why do you want to be with a bear anyway? I asked. Two teenagers pushed past us with their skateboards. Balloons floated above Main Street, announcing a sale at the furniture shop. Why do you want to be with me? She asked. We parted ways when the light changed, but later I went to her home dressed as a bear. She opened the door. Come in, she said, putting her arms around me. You don't smell like a bear, she said. Then in walked the bear with a fierce look on his face. He growled, and so did I. He cuffed me, so I cuffed him back. Then we grappled with each other, bear hugging until Liza stepped in between us and held out her hands. I'm sick of bears, she said. Get out of here. I ripped off my bear mask. I'm not a bear, I said. The bear ripped off his. I quit this game, he said. I'm not a bear either. Liza removed her mask, and she wasn't Liza. We ran away as fast as we could. I made it back to my place and locked the door, turning on the outside light, but all night I heard her huffing. Well, since I'm getting such a good response, I'll read another comic piece or two, so if you don't. So this one's titled During Sex, and there's a reference to Game of Thrones, the Khaleesi, who was the mother of dragons, played by Emilia Clarke, and she had this long blonde wig, and she would say Dracarys to when she wanted her dragons to torture enemies. So that comes in toward the end. So, and the title leads into the main poem. During sex, Odalise, her eyes closed, called me Brad, meaning Brad Pitt. Since Brad Pitt has long, dirty blonde hair and is layered with all kinds of muscle, and since I'm on the flabby side, pear-shaped with black hair, always neatly combed, even during sex, I knew she wasn't trying to say I'm her Brad Pitt. I seized up immediately and got off her. I didn't like being on top anyway. She had one of those sunbeam light bulbs that felt as though it were burning the hair off my head. Why did you stop? She asked. You were imagining that Brad Pitt was on top of you, I said. She pulled the covers over her chest and sat up. Last week during sex, you called me Eliza, your first wife's name. And the week before that, with your eyes closed in the middle of your orgasm, you shouted Queen Bey. And then on another evening, you whispered, Sing for me, Tay Tay. I could go on. Enough, I said, lying on my back in the memory foam. Who was I to her, and who was she to me? Were we only the vehicle of each other's fantasies? What would happen if I fantasized making love to Odalise while actually making love to Odalise? Not sure I really wanted to know. Touched her body and she touched my face. I whispered in her ear, Khaleesi, wrenching her to me. As she rose, she pretended to shake free a shower of silver blonde hair. Her voice grew louder, more forceful, issuing commands in her native language. Dracarys, her dragons flying, breathing fire. The next one, thank you. The next one is called Senior Pickleball. And senior pickleball is, by the way, the fastest growing sport in America. I've read over and over again. And the seniors like myself, are the largest group playing it. Also, we're the largest group in the emergency room, by the way. I wanted to add that as well. So anyway, senior pickleball. My first partner collapsed on the court while in the midst of her serve. As she lay there, she had a smile on her face and a look of pure generosity in her brown eyes. She lifted her paddle and whispered, Give it to your next partner. My next partner, a small woman with blue hair and tight skin, had 7 paddles of her own. She played 7 days a week and used a different paddle for each day, her paddles labeled with the days of the week. She smashed the ball at me with tremendous force, as if she were trying to kill her opponent. Fortunately, most of her returns slashed into the net. Then one afternoon, she rose up in air like a blue heron and slammed the ball into my belly, her shoulder coming out of its socket. She screamed in pain while I attempted to jerk it back into place. She left the court in an ambulance without her Thursday paddle. My next partner, tall and lanky with long gray hair, held together in a bun with a long stick pin, charged the net so fast she fell over it into my side of the court and was also carried off in a stretcher, her paddle and ball at her side. I played with one more partner, a gentle white-haired woman, deceptively strong for her 80 years. We had some mean volleys that winded both of us. And then on the winning point in our last game, we both charged the net. As I returned her volley, she took a powerful swing that missed the winning shot, but smashed me in the face. When I opened my eyes, she was kneeling over me. "You won," she said. "Great shot." And then the paramedics put me on a stretcher, tied me in for a wild ride in their ambulance. Just another true story of senior pickleball. All right, well, switching tones a little bit here. I've been writing a lot of poems about the tremendous attack on truth and the distortion of reality since the first administration. So I thought I'd read one of those, and it's called "The Last Truth." One truth was shot while it sat in a cafe, sipping an Americano and writing its memoir. Another truth rose up on a stage and protested the swarm of lies that had descended on the town, clinging to heads and faces or flying down throats. The mob rushed the stage, pummeling this truth until it fell beneath them. They kicked and stomped it to death. Another truth was tortured until it confessed that it was a lie, and then the spirit left its body, and only emptiness resided inside it. Many truths were burned in the public square as they screamed, "I'm telling the truth." We collected their ashes and bone in an urn and tried to bring them back to life with spells and chants. But our words had lost their belief in the power to summon. And the last truth, hiding for months in abandoned buildings, escaped into the forest. When it returned years later, no one recognized it or believed what it was saying. So along with that, I decided to read this piece called "What Happened to the Country." I wrote it during the first Trump administration. I thought, well, I'll read it now because it applies even more now than it did then. So it's "What Happened to the Country." Some say the president declared the country his and took it home. Some say the country was wild turkeys waddling under the blind blue sky, deer leaping into the foliage, but hunters dispatched them into the next world. Some say that even though hundreds of trucks cranked their winches, the country sank into the quagmire and pulled the trucks down with it, bubbles bursting on the surface. Some say you can still find the country if you have the right map, but so many have followed their maps, disappearing without leaving behind a note or sign. Though many remember the country with tears in their eyes, and many salute when they hear it called by name. Though some decry the country as a false brotherhood, others believe it was an idea, and ideas evolve into other ideas, or evaporate like rain beaded on window frames whose glass has been shattered. Without a country, without a piece of land, there is nothing to fight over. And now, all of us are refugees, walking in twos or threes toward nowhere anyone can imagine. And I'm going to finish up with the poem that Philip introduced me with, Newman's Own, just because I feel like it was part of my Jewish identity growing up. I was sort of surrounded by a lot of anti-Semitism. And I remember thinking, I was a big fan of Paul Newman's, Kafka, and all the Jews that you could think of, like Philip Roth and others, who sort of went into forming my identity. So I'm going to read this one, Newman's Own. My lover thought I was Paul Newman, which is probably why she became my lover. One night in bed, I told her the truth. I'm not Paul Newman. She started to laugh. You're a joker, all right, she said. No, really, I said. Paul Newman has blue eyes that are clear as skies. I've got dark, beady brown eyes, Hungarian eyes. He has a square jaw, and I have a weak chin. partially hidden by a scraggly beard. I never made love to Liz Taylor or Dominique Sanda or Joanna Woodward, and I don't drink two six-packs in 2 months, let alone 2 hours. Well, she said, your tomato sauce is pretty good. Thank you very much for your patience. Appreciate it.
Great. Great, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's funny, people also think I'm Paul Newman when they're really drunk.
Well, they think I'm your brother too.
Thank you so much. It's rare to have such funny poetry in the world. I find it hard to discover funny poetry like yours.
Well, thank you.
It's a difficult feat.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Okay. Now I'm going to introduce our next poet. Donna Spruijt-Metz. Metz's poetry accomplishes wondrous feats with language, imagery, and bravely faces the devastating aspects of our world. The next line of her poem often takes you to someplace unexpected, but always satisfying. Renowned poet Carl Phillips observed that Donna's poems are stitched equally with wit, tenderness, and the grace of longing. Donna further raises the stakes of her poems by often speaking to God directly, addressing him or her with the word you in capital letters. Her book, To Phrase a Prayer for Peace, was released in March and should be on everyone's shopping list. Yeshua November, who happens to be a relative of mine and therefore must be trusted, said the following: subtle, delicate, and capable of balancing paradoxes, Donna Spruijt-Metz's voice holds a striking contemporary freshness, even as David's ancient psalms serve as her point of departure. And time and again, she appeals to the divine to save the world from the sorrows of war. It would be easy to go on and on with superlatives about Donna's work, but it is best to let her work do the talking. Donna?
Thank you, Phil, for what I'm humbled and going to try not to cry because it doesn't go well with reading. Thank you, Baruch and Phil, for inviting me. Jeff, you're a hard act to follow, but I'm glad you got some comedy out of the way because there's maybe one funny poem in this book, and I'll read it. Start my timer. So this book is a cryologue, basically. I started writing poems on October 7th, actually before I heard the news, but I just knew something was off. And I wrote poems every day until day 155, and I realized I wasn't being honest anymore. And I stopped. And the only way I could get myself to stop was to pick the poems out of this mess that made a little bit of sense. And I made a book of it and sent it to a friend, and she gave it to Wild House Press. And they took it, so I never actually had a chance to submit it, which is such a huge honor. So it's not a happy book, and it's just chronological. So I'm gonna start with this. This is the day for day one, and my friend R comes back again and again in the book. He's a good friend of mine. He's a blind poet, and I sent him all my stuff, and he sends me his stuff. So I talk to him a lot in the book. So that's who R is. Darkest myth for day one of the Israel-Hamas war before I heard the news for R. I'm a night writer, and no matter how hard I try to bend myself into daylight, I long for the dark. But what do I know of darkness? My version of darkness is full of candlelight. So day 3 of the war, unknown. Monday, October 9th, 2023, 7:37 p.m., and I'm still alive, but terrified. My daughter has gone militant, but death is everywhere, and I'm not militant. I'm heartbroken. Walking the dogs tonight, I met a woman. She saw my Mogan David and needed to talk. We sobbed into one another's unknown. This day 4 of the war has a quote in it from Adília Prado, one of my favorite Brazilian poets. And I will do this so that you know where the stolen line is. It has an epigraph. Day 4 of the war. Hashtag we are toast, Dana Levin. It's 7:57 p.m. PST, October 10th, 2023. And I have lived through this day. I weep from room to room. It is taught that prayers said in community are multicolored, while individual prayers are monochrome. We tinker. We are haphazard technicians. God is what we need, and fast. All God's welcome. So day 14, we thought this was going to be a 2-week war. The heck. And my friend Roy has stopped commenting on my poetry, so I'm thinking, oh God, he hates it. Just want to hear about this. So this is for Roy again. Day 14, Little Power. Hello, silent one. Are my war poems making you uncomfortable? It's only anguish. My power is of the small variety, the power of knockoff crystal. Yet I can't stop these poems. The sun, tempered today by breeze, me, fed and free in a country where others are not. My child, not gone to war, and the war hasn't come to her. Not yet. But oh my Lord, all the children, all of them. This is another daughter poem. My daughter's a doctor. Day 24, I am sick again, but this time I understand it better, the guts rebellion. This time I return to the bland, and yes, I'm feeling extinct in this slaughtering season. My daughter says I don't do well with upheaval, says I'm not great at death and destruction. It's a weakness. By day 31, I was so sick of writing these poems, but like I said, I couldn't get them to stop. So this is day 31. And now can I stop this? Even though breath has become a privilege, in the margins of my innocence, I scribble, let there be peace. No stopping yet, girl, old girl, woman, towering, speak. You only have everything to lose. So as Baruch said, I work a lot with Psalms. And when I have a Psalm poem, or often in my poems, I talk to the deity or the holy or God or Hashem or the Shekinah, however you want to put it. And that's just capital Y-O-U. And I got to that because in Judaism, we have so many names for Adonai. And they all address one aspect of them, and they all feel very third person and distant. And by this time, I just wanted to have I wanted to have a little talk. So this is me having a little talk. On day 34, I ask you to teach us again. After Psalm 116, verses 5 through 8. Ancient concepts, nurture, compassion, justice. Teach us again. We are perpetrators of the unforgivable. We forget. Yet even standing in this rubble, you invite us to return to peace. You say, return. You say, ears. You say, stumble. And we do. We stumble. So this is one of the only funny poems in the book. Sort of funny, doesn't end funny, but has some funny, so comic relief here. I mentioned 2 poems in this poem. One is End of Poetry by Adel Limon, and one is You Are Who I Love by Aricelis Germain. Love poem for day 39. What I want tonight is only a small thing. I want to write that poem about enough, the one that says enough of the brutal, or the one that starts with you selling roses, or to lie on a white damask Victorian couch, my hair coiffed elaborately, my ardent breast draped in an amber satin dress, one elegant hand thrown across my brow, one shoe having just fallen from my delicate foot. But I don't have delicate feet, and those poems have already been written. And tonight, I cannot find the courage to love. Oh, we all know Danny Kraft. I was taking a Yiddish poetry class with Danny, and this happened. Psalm for day 82 after Psalm 116, verses 9 through 14. The poet tells us this: once you took 2 heaps of letters, threw them from a mountaintop, and scattered them across all the paths of the world. We are still trying to puzzle them into words, the words that you surely intended. Didn't you? We just need a little grace down here right now, maybe a hint or two on how to solve this lethal puzzle. How can I stand and be counted when it's the counting itself, the sifting into categories, the willful separation that will kill us all? Day 60. I really thought this would be a milestone. The gematria of the Hebrew letter Samech, 60. Beautiful letter, isn't it? Circular almost, like the endless cycle of life, a symbol of support and protection, completeness. Was I wrong to think that on day 60, beasts of all stripes would look up from their prey, teeth bloodied, and seek respite? But no, it's just another slaughter day. Day 64, words damage. So by this time, I've lost faith in all the news. I'm going through 7 news sources before I sit down to write, because none of it seems true anymore, and it's all very different. News from Israel, news from England, news from the Netherlands, where I lived. I was out of faith in news and left with faith in God. Day 64, words damage. I try to understand, read across sources, across borders, but every news source I read is grimmer than the one I read before. No, that's wrong. The order of my reading doesn't matter. The spiral of damage is recursive, reads cumulative from any direction. Tonight, I miss my daughter so hard. She went to live across the country in what might be our last safe year. This is a very short poem. Breathe and it's over. Day 75. I step away to lick wounds. If a poem is a tattoo, I am inked and scarred by these words. Day 82, I want. This is about, I don't know if it happened to the rest of you, but slowly but surely in the course of this war, I have been less and less able to have an open discussion with friends and family. Everybody's got a different opinion, and boy, are they wrong about it. So it became really hard to have an open discussion. Friends of ours came to visit from the Netherlands, and I thought, yay, we can talk about it. It'll be good. We couldn't. We could not talk about the war. Day 82, I want. I'm spending money at our overstocked market, making a grand dinner for our guests, and yet we can't talk about the war. Israeli soldiers dying because never again, and they aren't wrong, but Gazans starving, needing the basics of life, like water. I need a poem driven by the unbearable dailiness of this time. Why can't I ask, what do you mean? Instead of wedging my own hot and sticky and urgent opinion into it? Why can't you? This is R again. My friend summarizes my days. You get up every morning, dress in blacks and grays, and write poetry about the war. This is the title poem for the book, Day 118, The Proper Way to Phrase a Prayer for Peace. After Psalm 118, verses 25 through 29. And what I wanted to say before I read this poem is that Torah, Psalms, the Talmud, the Zohar, they all teach about the importance of words. How how you phrase a thing matters. And, be careful what you ask for matters. And that can sometimes make prayer, for me, really terrifying. The proper way to phrase a prayer for peace. What if I ask for the wrong thing? My words are imprecise, and you tend towards the literal. I'm listening to the noise that the hours make, waiting for my heart to soften, waiting for the ribbons that bind me to loosen, and then I might know what to ask and how to ask for it. And I'll close with one more psalm. Swarm, after Psalm 119, verses 1 through 2. My heart risks it all, says generous, but my mind is wily, unkind. These war days drag me down, seaweed in precarious seas. Disoriented, the sea's floor lost to me for holdfast. No latch and tug, can't drag myself up to the shoreline, salty and dripping, and sure this time that I found your way as if it were up for interpretation. But I do, I interpret furiously. And now, scraping down through the fury, the cruelty, at the bottom of it all is the lowest point. At the lowest point, my ears hear your whisper. The whole heart will find me. Thank you.
Thanks so much for those searing, powerful poems. Every poem, the last line just, you really ended each, the poem's wonderful and powerful, but those ending, that's maybe the secret of the power of a poem is how it ends. And those poems are really close, if not prayers. The title about the way to frame a prayer for peace, also a way to frame a poem for peace too. Prayers and poems. Prayers are, I don't know. So thank you for those. Okay. Yerra Sugarman is our next reader. Am I pronouncing that first name correctly, Yerra? Okay, all right. As a poet, essayist, translator, and teacher, born in Canada, and now lives in New York City. Maybe wants to go back to Canada. I don't know. She was the author of 3 poetry collections, Forms of Gone, which was a National Book Critics Circle favorite first book award. The Bag of Broken Glass, which was a National Book Critics Circle recommended book, and her most recent book called Ant Bird, a hybrid collection comprised of lyric poems, prose poems, and lyric essays. It's published by Four Way Books. It's the winner of the American Book Fest 2020 Best Books Awards in the category of general poetry, finalist for the National Jewish Book Award. Wow, pretty good. She's a daughter of Holocaust survivors and grew up in a community of survivors in Toronto. She's taught at the University of Houston, Rutgers, NYU, City College of New York, New School, and University of Toledo. Or in Ohio, my home state. Very good. There are poets, and we all have them, that we particularly connect with. Their poems move through us. They even remind us of our own writing sometimes, or rather what we might have written had we that fine imagination and skill. These poets touch what I call our poetry bone. This is true for me regarding Yara's work. Certainly her embracing and empathy towards her subjects, Holocaust survivors and victims, often universal but appropriate on this day, Yom HaShoah, but every day. Her poems, none other than for Primo Levi, and her elegiac and epic-like searing poems inspired by her aunt and her latest collection, Aunt Bird. Reading them, Yerra imagines the unimaginable. I mean, I find as I'm reading them that Yerra imagines the unimaginable. I'm quoting from one of her poems. Your bones burrow underground, they can't keep still. Every day they search for a place to sleep. What stops the wind and puts your name in its mouth? How do I harness the right words for you? Yerra asks a lot of questions in her poems. I like a lot of questions in poetry, so maybe that's one reason I like her poetry so much, because she asks a lot of questions. Startling as how is also how Yerra does, in fact, through memory, imagination, harness the right specific words for the specific act for whom these struggled for words are dedicated. And I'm probably going to mispronounce this, for Figa Mahler, okay, who died in Krakow, in the Krakow. What's Yerra's poetry has done and continues to do is resurrect the life of one victim so thoroughly it is a tribute to them all, which leads me to another quality of Yerra's poetry that I admire. Along with her deep sense of tragedy and lament, she is also engaged in the power of language to celebrate, to honor the body, the spirit. I'm awed by her translations from the Yiddish poet Celia Dropkin, about whom Yerra said, her transgressive work, sometimes compared to Plath's, exceeded the limits of acceptable discourse in her time, and even now challenges conventions about sex, marriage, and motherhood. We find that same quality in Yerra's own work. From her sonnet, From Aleph to Bet, she says, with a mouthful of hallelujahs, I fall on my knees before the sacred ceremony of your pelvis and skin. I'm like, okay, keep going. I'm a basin of want, he says. Wow, what a great line. So a poet who can write this intimately about the Holocaust and yet also about the sacred ceremony of your pelvis and skin is a kind of poetry I like to read, and poet I like to read. So let's welcome Yerra Sugarman.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Phil. That was a beautiful, very thorough introduction, and I appreciate your words so much. And thank you, Baruch, for inviting me, and Erica for organizing this. Yeah, so I'm going to start with a short poem that ends on a question, and I do like to ask questions, as Phil mentioned. I'm going to read just a few poems, maybe 3 poems from my book on Bird. And as Phil was saying, so the book is an book-length elegy to my aunt Vega Mahler, and Vega is bird in Yiddish. And so I had to do a lot of imagining because she was killed in the Krakow ghetto by the Nazis in 1942. And I also found some documentation about her on the internet, much to my surprise. So the book is a sort of confluence of my imagination and also some real actual documentation that I was able to discover. The first poem is called I Have Nothing to See Her With. I have nothing to see her with, my aunt, whose life is a ripped page. Does she suckle on wind, forage among roots, rummage near clawed feet, drink handfuls of rain? The next poem I'm going to read is called Night After Night, What She Saw in Her Sleep, and it's my imagining my Aunt Vega or my Aunt Bird dreaming, and it makes reference to Havdalah, which is a Jewish ceremony marking the end of the Sabbath and welcoming in the new week. Night after night, what she saw in her sleep, an upside-down Havdalah candle like the one she lit to usher in the new week at the end of every Sabbath, praying Blessed God who separates light from dark. The candle in her dreams, like her real candle, had 4 wicks and 4 braided strands of wax, but it produced no flames, only entrails of light. And she dreamt God unhinged the constellations and whisked away the stars, uncreating, the pitch darkness a grave she couldn't find a way out of. And she dreamt she was a stone a crow lifted and tucked into the wind, a girl born to memory that hushes the sun and takes the place of trees' shadows. When she woke, the war still raged, and the sky hardened into rock. She wondered, why is God doing this? And the thunder thundered, why are people doing this? Despair swooping over her, her grief a kind of wingspan. Delirious as the rain the river guzzled, she became a stranger to herself, circling her own shadow, searching for her beliefs, her mind like shattered glass, and the world stuck in her throat like a bone. The next one I'm going to read is also imagining my Aunt Vega, and it's called When She Was Fenced Off Even from Herself. And I think I mentioned she was murdered in the Krakow ghetto by the Nazis. When she was fenced off even from herself, she had that strangled feeling as if the alphabet forgot her lips. How did she mend thoughts that snapped like strained violin strings? Sometimes her mind was a turnip she buried in the ground. Licked by wind, old chairs were left scattered on her ghetto street, abandoned by Jews rounded up for transport. But to where? And she watched grief sit on the shoulders of women whose legs were knitting needle thin, women who covered their eyes with their hands and still recited blessings over candles lit to honor the Sabbath. Once she overheard someone say, "My heart was a sparrow, now it's caught in a vice." Reading Dostoevsky, she was shocked to learn he spent 4 whole years in a Siberian prison with only the Bible as his friend. This gave her hope, so she could still fall in love with a certain kind of star, bright as a glowing Swati, a shiny coin in the sky, even when she thought the moon was inside out. Soldering bits of life together like scraps of steel, she and her sister Hannah believed it would be a sin to ever laugh again. But they laughed, Lord. They laughed, and their hearts were brown wings. And I'll read one more from the book. And this is a poem called Kiddush. And Kiddush is a Jewish prayer recited over a cup of wine before the meal on the eve of Sabbath or on a festival. And this poem I wrote, I am addressing my aunt. I'm writing, it's dedicated to her. And it's about what was happening and is still happening here in our country. Kiddush. In this world, tyrants gaze at themselves in mirrors and comb their hair. Withered leaves fall out, stabbed by spikes of sunlight. Commands claw the air. In this world, where there are still celebrations, the last breeze coming from a jailed girl's body, the final breath released from the lungs of a 7-year-old, she is called Jacqueline C. Floats past barbed wire nettles budding on a fence that surrounds a detention camp for migrants, knife-lit human invention. In this world, I touch a glass with my mouth and drink to all creation. Tell me how I can keep from falling, how to turn grief into a green stem sprouting, so it is not just a stem, but joy. And I'll just read a couple from a series or a sequence I'm writing called Aleph and Bet, a romance, and it's Aleph and Bet, the letters in the Hebrew alphabet, having a relationship, a love affair. The first one's called Sonnet from Aleph to Bet. Lust leaks from the inner rings of our bodies. Lust leaks from the inner rings of our bodies, tree trunks scarred with age. We say we're tired, but our lust surges above oceans, loosens clouds, and frees the sky. It unchains hurricanes and brings saw-toothed parsnips into being. Our love breeds stinging nettles that flank the woods. No one guesses it hums within our skin. When I was young, did I river next to fields feeling this much rapture? Did I break open with more happiness, hiking along coastal meadows or striding on city streets? Sometimes I want to tell you I'm afraid of joy. Sometimes I believe I'm worthy only of grief. Even when dogwoods blossom, I, a fool, cling to the faith I have only in my grief. And I'll end on one more Aleph and Bet poem. This is called Sonnet from Bet to Aleph. Restraint heals nothing now. Restraint heals nothing now. These days haul our souls right out of our bodies. You pinch your face. It tightens when compassion is toppled like a nest and every egg inside it shatters. Still, I watch you soap your legs as you shower, savor how suds pool around your feet. I touch your breasts and taste your hair. The moon rises, a sphere bright as an apple cut open. Trouble we never dreamed of is lit like a match. Our lips unclasp. On TV, armies ram peaceful protesters into vans, their cheeks bloodied by rubber bullets. I store language in my mouth. How much longer will I camouflage words, sleep happily on my belly like a child? My love, the armies fire tear gas at people, wiping their eyes, dropping to their knees as if in prayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Yerra. Whenever I hear really good poetry, it makes me feel like writing. And right now I feel like writing. And I'm sure our next poet will do the same. And her name is Pamela Wax. It is an honor to introduce her. She is the author of praiseworthy volumes of poetry. She has won multiple awards for her work, including one from Patterson Literary Journal, which happens to be one of my favorites. The author, Lisa Bellamy, praised Pamela, saying she is a compassionate narrator who takes on fertility, grief, female energy, and resistance. Another author, Michelle Herman, said Pamela Wax's poems Open their arms and let the wide world in. They are poems of a restless and searching intelligence, hungry to make crazy, wonderful leaps. Indeed, what I particularly like about Pamela's poems is that her lines are often woven together by leaps of the imagination and wonder. Pamela has also had the honor of being nominated for 2 Best of Net awards, and her poems have appeared in such respected journals as Tupelo Quarterly, Barrow Street, and numerous others. I can't wait to hear what she has to read for us.
Thank you, Baruch, and thank you all. Thank you, Phil, for inviting me. And I have a number of friends on this Zoom call. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to start with a poem called A Prayer of Jerusalem for Yehuda Amichai, my favorite poet of all. Phil, I also love the one that you wrote, the dialogue between Amichai and Darwish, which I love to teach. The poem references 3 of Amichai's poems and has an epigraph by Gabriel Marcel. Hope is a memory of the future. On full moon midnights, I meet the dead poet at David's gate. His satchel bulges with leather-skinned pomegranates bleeding juice. The tourists, there to walk the ramparts, look past him to the tower. I am not a tourist. How many, he asks. Hundreds, I say. He's not asking shekels or children or poems. He's plumbing the wells of my devotion to the would-be peace of this place. How often I've gulped ashes. On the eve of fragile huts, we wander old city alleys, citron wafting from our palms. We remember tomorrow, without 30-centimeter bombs or a human chain stretched from holy to profane. After Elijah sets his scalpel to the heart of the city, hawks and doves feed from the same watering hole. The streets brim bread and Jerusalem roses. It is the full moon of Nisan. The poet wonders, Ma nishtana? What has changed this night? We watch the moon, gape at the swarming streets. Everything changes. What I'm just put into the chat is the letter Aleph. So, Yerra, I also have an Aleph poem. It's called Searching for the Aleph, but you need to be able to picture it. And there's another pictogram in the poem, which is the original Aleph, which represents the ox's head, but I'm not putting that into the chat. Searching for the Aleph. Some believe it will find you if your butt stays glued to a zafu. Others remind you that it lives a life of obscurity in Borges' short story. Marcus says he saw it masquerading as a half-assed octopus in the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Hannah spotted it on the brow of a golem as he escaped his fate as a clod of clay. Philologists say it's a stubborn pictogram of an ox's head, muzzled and mute, before its resurrection as an A. Rabbi Sarah teaches that God hangs from that one true diagonal, swinging between the upper and lower realms. Stephen licked honey from it on his first day of school, and rainbows still radiate from his tongue. I swear, I saw thousands erupt from Old Faithful as tiger swallowtails headed towards Mount Sinai. Where is the Axis Mundi? When will the Messiah come? So the quotes that Baruch shared were from my chapbook Starter Mothers, my first volume, Walking the Labyrinth, are a lot of poems working through my grief after my brother's suicide in 2018. And so the next couple of poems reference that. This one is called Approaching Zeal, a run-on abecedarian. For those who don't know, an abecedarian goes from A through Z, but this is a run-on. It repeats A through D at the end. Alacrity, not my middle name, boldly lays siege, item by item, to a miasmic to-do catalog approaching zeal. That's someone else's doppelganger, not mine. I'm more easygoing, except when I'm not. A laissez-faire, drop by whenever, give what you can kind of gal, listless. However you slice it, whatever its name, I gave up on musts and have-tos just after my brother jumped from a bridge, knocking us from fixed latitudes and longitudes, like so many pickup sticks or dominoes, cascading nihilistically toward a place our eyes are still adjusting to 3 years later. Perhaps it's relevant that my middle name, quixotically, is Joy, claimed, lost, now reclaimed anew. A virtue so mismatched to my guilt that I gathered it, stick by fucking plastic-colored stick, until it resembled a structure, vulnerable, but still standing. A cairn, wobbling ever so slightly at the crossroads of a trailhead, aching to dance. You can choose this route or that, blazing in possibility, open to the winds, amid parting seas and timbrels, or battle your brother at the Jabbok, circa the rest of your God-given days. I choose both shores. Day of Atonement. If, on the Sabbath of Sabbaths, you were absent from kindergarten, the only Jew in your class, let alone the whole school, you might be invited by Mrs. Buds when you returned to stand tall, project like a shofar to the back of the room, and tell all about your holy day. All I knew then was Moses in the bulrushes, where I wanted to be hiding, the mimeograph I colored in Sunday school, a baby adrift in an ark, waterproofed with pine tar and pitch, a mother's last prayer hanging on the refrigerator at home. There was no room yet for contrition or repentance in this basket floating down the Nile toward accountability. I knew how to say she did it of my younger sister. It's his fault of a brother too young to walk or talk, but not, I'm sorry. I pressed my patent leather heels together to keep my knees from quaking and gave my first sermon, ad-libbed, about a baby who had to fast until he found the breast of his mother down the river. He wasn't sorry, just hungry. And now, more than 50 years later, I taste the truth of it. My brother was just hungry for a mother down the river from where he landed face down, and I'm left rueful I wasn't she, the guilt inky as resin, sticking to everything. Pulling the dead from the pool. I'm reacquainted with death each morning as I skim corpses of mice, frogs, and moths from my friend's pool. Before I swim, I discern a sheeny copper beetle, Japanese, from a longhorn, a leggy mosquito hawk from its namesake. Scooped and soggy on the net, the bees make me saddest, auguring the collapse of creation. I toss them into the woods, a bit too casually it seems now. I watch an eagle circling against changeling clouds as I backstroke, half pondering his comeback from near extinction. My friend told me a moose jumped the fence and drowned in her pool years ago. But I need no memento mori, me, well into autumn, still swimming open air, racing against my fishy self, limber and cold-blooded. So Jewish geography, the next poem I'm going to read is a little longer, and this is one of my poems that references the Holocaust in honor of Yom HaShoah. My mother never taught me bridge, though she was a master. The game I mastered was imbibed with her milk and carried on her breath. Anyone who's Jewish, and that's most everyone I know, plays it. You meet someone at a simcha, you ask where they're from, and when they say Austin or Boise or Cleveland, you say something like, "Do you know Susie Gantz, a chiropractor in Shaker Heights? Her ex, he once won big on Jeopardy, was my cousin Mike's college roommate." In my 20s, I lived on an Iris Lane in California with a new friend whose mother had grown up with my father and his siblings. It turns out the candlesticks we never lit on Friday nights had been a wedding gift from her Grandma Belle to my parents. At my wedding, my old friend Alana plotzed when she saw my husband's old friend Steve, her first cousin. Who knew? Our mutual friend Atara from the Bronx recognized my husband's old friend Yochai from Brooklyn, to whom she'd sold her car in a previous incarnation. These things happen, my husband said, when I asserted on our first night as a married couple that these were signs, binding worlds of past and present, double blessing our union from above. No, babe, they're not even small m miracles. I looked pityingly at my Beshert for his paucity of imagination and quoted Einstein. Coincidences, my dear, are God's way of staying anonymous. And so it goes, whether it's Susie or Jack, a teacher or a dentist, an old buddy or kin. You never know where the invisible threads of connection will travel. Sometimes they don't say Memphis, New York, or Orlando. They tell you their people are from Minsk, Dnepropetrovsk, or Warsaw, places haunted by dislocated souls in unmarked graves. You compare notes on pogroms and camps, Odessa, Lvov, Treblinka, Ravensbrück. Who was where when? Your father's great-aunt Leah, their grandpa Moishe, your mother's cousin Pesha once removed. The history you gleaned from eavesdropping, and the history you yourself disinterred as a detective in foreign archives. And when there's a winner, ding, 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 those 2 degrees of separation require letting Susie, Mike, and even the ex know about this serendipitous encounter. You needn't contact the dead. They already know you are playing the game without them. Even some non-Jews play it. You live in Denver, they live in Denver. And when they come back from visiting their daughter in Tucson, they might say, "We went to the JCC, the best pool around, and there was this lovely couple, last name Goldberg. Do you know them?" It happens, really. And you do. Of course you do, because even when you don't, the Jewish answer is yes, I know them. We met at Sinai. So I don't know. I didn't keep track of time. I have 2 more short ones. Is that okay, Baruch? Okay. This is a newer poem. Adjacent Graves, Mount Solomon Cemetery. If bones could pray, they'd surely squeeze their socket eyes in their scully, breathless tombs. And if bones had humor, for sure they'd tickle one another with their dry, funny, bony wit. And if bones could weave, they'd knit their fingers forth to forth until wed, alive, and wholly whole, as I knew them before, alone, alone. And the last one, we are now in the period that we call the Omer, between Passover and Shavuot, a practice that is very dear to me of counting. And this one is called the 42nd day of the Omer 2020, with an epigraph from the Baal Shem Tov, in which he says, I become ever more joyful as I get closer to the day on which Torah was given. That's why I dance ecstatically after the counting of the Omer. I spoke about joy on the evening of his second yahrzeit, and in the morning I spoke about wilderness. Then I baked a chocolate souffle with strawberries in a microwavable mug, 1 minute and 30 seconds exactly, rather than a leaching rainbow palette of M&M pancakes he might have preferred. I wiped my lips, went out to the garden and planted my parsley and beans, something I would not do a year ago in the midst of weeds and chaos. In the afternoon, I sat with 300 people on Zoom and taught again about joy and again about wandering and coming home through the desert. We sat in silence together for a time, breathing in hope, breathing out uncertainty. And then, in his honor, I turned on my music, stretched my hand toward him, and danced. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for using the word plots, by the way. Wow, what wonderful poetry. How about that, Baruch?
It was a great evening of poetry. I really was moved.
Wow.
I know this will sound cliche, but I laughed and I cried, and at least on the inside. And what more can you ask for from poetry?
Nothing. I think it was a Super Bowl of poetry.
I think so.
Thank you so much. Wow, I'm ready to plots. How about you guys? Any questions or comments or whatever before
Praise? Any
any
praise?
praises?
Wonder?
This was an
Funny?
amazing evening of poetry. It really was fantastic. I'm so glad to be here and with you all.
Good to see you, Richard.
Yeah, good to see you, Rich.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's nice to see familiar faces coming to these and just enjoying. It's a kind of community that we have, and it's wonderful. Mishpocha, as it were, as Pam's poem pointed out about who we know and how we know them and how we're related. And I think we're poets are all related anyway, no matter what backgrounds they have and where they're from and what language they speak. And so thank you, Yerra and Jeff and Pam and Donna. We really made this evening transcendent for me, and we appreciate it. And now the sun is setting and the birds are singing, and it's just a beautiful thing. So let's keep that spirit going. And our next event is May
29th. I just put the link in there in the chat if anyone's interested.
Yehoshua in November. We have Alicia Oestreicher and who else?
Carly Hoffman.
What a lineup. But each month is a lineup. So unfortunately, it's our last one of the year. We just burn
So
out.
quick.
So please join us if you can next month and keep in touch. And Erica is amazing at getting back to everybody who came with links to folks to their poets' books. And it's going to be on the YouTube if you may not know, but now you do. It's recorded, so it'll be on YouTube pretty soon. Erica, it doesn't really take too long, right?
Yep, I'm gonna try and get it done tomorrow.
And we have past readings on YouTube as well. So if you have a rainy day and you can't get out to the garden, listen to some, put on the YouTube, listen to some Jewish poetry, and have a good time. All right. So, Baruch, yeah,
I want to thank everyone for turning out tonight, for coming onto Zoom and being here and being supportive of poetry. It's always wonderful to see new faces and old faces and my own face.
I don't know about that, Baruch.
Oh, come
You
on.
went overboard on that one.
Come on.
We love you. All right. Thank you so much, y'all.